I still remember that afternoon like it was yesterday. I was in the middle of a busy conference in Chicago, sitting in a room full of professionals, my mind half focused on the speaker and half distracted by the steady buzz of my phone against the table. When I glanced down and saw Evan's name flashing across the screen, I figured it would be the usual quick check-in. Maybe a "how's it going" or "don't forget to grab dinner." I slipped out into the hallway, away from the noise, and answered with a smile already forming on my face. But what I heard next wiped every trace of it away. "I'm divorcing you," Evan said flatly, without a hint of emotion. "Also, just so you know, I've already sold the condo. You'll need to find somewhere else to live." For a second, I just stood there, frozen. My heart hammered so loudly in my ears that I barely heard anything else he said after that. It wasn't even the words themselves. It was the sheer cruelty in the way he delivered them, like he had been rehearsing it and finally got to enjoy the moment. There was no regret, no sadness, just a cold finality. I gripped my phone tightly and steadied my breathing. He wanted me to lose it. I could hear it in the pause he left, like he was waiting for the tears, the begging, the chaos. But I refused to give him that satisfaction. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice sharper than I expected.
Yeah.
"Good luck, Brooke," he said casually before hanging up. For a few moments, I stood staring at the blank screen, my reflection staring back at me in the polished glass walls of the hallway. In the background, the conference noise faded into a distant hum. I was completely alone with the weight of what had just happened. I slid my phone into my bag, squared my shoulders, and walked calmly back into the conference room. But inside, 1,000 thoughts were racing. How had I not seen this coming? The truth was I had, in pieces, in little moments I had pushed aside because it was easier to hope than to admit the truth. Evan had changed long before that call. The late nights at work, that didn't add up. The passive-aggressive comments about my career taking up too much of my time. The way he stopped listening, stopped caring about the things that mattered to me. I had watched the man I married slowly turn into someone unrecognizable, someone who used my love as leverage and my loyalty as a weapon. We had been married for 6 years. I was 28 when we tied the knot, full of dreams and ideas about the future we would build together. Evan was 31 then, charming and ambitious. I was proud of him, proud to be by his side. But somewhere along the way, pride turned into obligation, and love turned into manipulation. And yet, as I sat there pretending to listen to the panel discussion, a strange calmness washed over me. Because there was something Evan didn't know, something that changed everything. Earlier that year, after a lot of discussion, or more accurately, after Evan pushing me to refinance so he could invest in some grand new project, the condo we lived in had been refinanced solely in my name. Evan had signed the papers without reading them properly, too distracted by whatever big scheme he was chasing at the time. Legally, the condo wasn't his to sell. Not even a little bit. I almost laughed out loud at the realization. He thought he had pulled the ultimate move, leaving me with nothing. But in reality, all he had done was set himself up for a legal disaster. The buyer he sold the place to? That deal wasn't worth the paper it was written on. And Evan, in his arrogance, hadn't even seen it coming. I didn't cry. Not then. Not long after that night, when I was alone in my hotel room. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the email chain with my lawyer, and began to plan my next move. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to fight smart. As soon as I got back to my hotel room, I locked the door, kicked off my heels, and sat cross-legged on the bed, my laptop balancing on my knees. Without wasting a second, I opened my contacts and tapped on Elena's number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Brooke? What's wrong?" she asked immediately, sensing the tension in my silence. I didn't even know where to begin. The words tumbled out of me. The call, the divorce, the condo. Everything. I could hear the outrage growing in Elena's voice as I spoke. She wasn't just my lawyer. She was one of my oldest friends, someone who had stood by me through some of the toughest moments of my life. And now, she was about to become my fiercest ally. "Elena, he thinks he's sold the condo," I finished, almost laughing from the absurdity of it. "He thinks he's thrown me out. There was a pause, then a low, sharp laugh from her end. "Oh, honey, he's in for a rude awakening," Elena said, her tone turning serious. "He can't sell something he doesn't own. Not only is the sale completely invalid, but if he represented himself as the owner, he could be looking at fraud charges. Real ones." The weight I had been carrying since the call lifted just a little. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling that old fire light inside me. "First thing, we notify the buyer. Whoever it is needs to know the sale isn't legit. We'll send a formal letter. I'll draft it tonight. We'll also send a cease and desist to Evan, making it very clear he has zero rights to the property. If he pushes this any further, we'll take it to court. And trust me, Brooke, he does not want that." I let out a long breath I didn't realize I had been holding. For the first time since the conference hallway, I felt something other than numbness. I felt focused, strong, dangerous even. "Thank you, Elena," I said, my voice steadier now. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll stay calm. He's counting on you to fall apart. Let's make sure he's the one who does instead." After we hung up, I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the twinkling city lights outside my window. I wasn't the same woman Evan had married, the one who would have cried herself to sleep and begged for answers. I had changed, slowly, quietly, without even realizing it. And now that change was the only thing protecting me. I spent the rest of the business trip moving through the motions, attending meetings, networking, smiling when needed. But underneath the surface, a different kind of preparation was happening. Every spare moment I had, I was thinking, planning, getting stronger. In the quiet of my hotel room each night, I built my armor piece by piece. I reviewed property documents, read legal clauses Elena sent over, drafted a list of everything Evan had said and done that could help in court if it came to that. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting myself, about refusing to be the helpless victim he expected me to be. And in that process, I realized something important. Evan had always underestimated me. From the very beginning, he had seen my kindness as weakness, my loyalty as something to be used. He had never really understood me. He had fallen in love with the idea of control, not with the woman standing beside him. The morning of my flight home, I packed my bag slowly, savoring the feeling of being back in control. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't scrambling. I was choosing every step with care. On the plane, I sat by the window, watching the ground shrink away beneath the clouds. I thought about Evan, about the man I once believed was my future. I remembered the promises he made, the plans we dreamed up late at night, the vows he whispered at the altar. And then I thought about how easily he had thrown it all away, how cruelly he had twisted the knife. But strangely, the sadness I expected didn't come. Instead, there was a quiet strength building inside me, growing steadier with every mile closer to home. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a different one where I fought for myself, not for someone who had never deserved me. And this time, I wasn't afraid. When I pulled into the parking lot of the condo, everything felt strangely still, almost too still. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on me. But instead of fear, I felt a cold, steady calmness. My keys jingled quietly as I unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside, everything looked the same. Evan's leather jacket tossed carelessly over the arm of the couch, his sneakers kicked off by the door. For someone who thought he had sold the place, he sure hadn't packed a thing. I dropped my suitcase by the entrance and walked through the living room slowly, taking it all in. It wasn't the home I had dreamed of when we bought this place. It was just a shell now, filled with echoes of broken promises. I didn't have long to wait. Barely 10 minutes after I arrived, the front door burst open so hard it slammed into the wall behind it. Evan stormed in, his face twisted in fury, waving a crumpled letter in his hand. Elena's letter. "What the hell is this, Brooke?" he barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. I stayed exactly where I was, standing calmly by the kitchen counter, my hands resting on the marble surface. "That," I said evenly, "is a formal notice that you had no right to sell this condo." He threw the letter onto the floor, and took a step toward me, his whole body practically vibrating with anger. "This is my place too," he shouted. "You're screwing me over." I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the document I had brought just for this moment. The deed. I unfolded it carefully and placed it on the counter between us. "You signed it over to me 6 months ago, Evan. You wanted to refinance so you could fund your business idea, remember? You didn't bother reading the paperwork. You just signed where they told you to." He stared at the paper, his face draining of color. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to form words, but couldn't find any that made sense. "No. No, you tricked me," he said finally, his voice cracking. I shook my head, feeling no sympathy. "No, Evan. You tricked yourself. You thought you could get away with blindsiding me. You thought I'd just roll over and cry while you tossed me out of my own home." His hands balled into fists at his sides. "You're unbelievable. After everything I did for you." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You mean the gaslighting? The constant criticism? The cheating? Yeah, you were a real saint." He turned away, running a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. The desperation was starting to seep through his anger now, thin and pathetic. "We can fix this," he said suddenly, spinning back toward me. "We can work something out. Just sell the place for real, and we can split it. It's the fair thing to do." I crossed my arms over my chest, the deed still sitting between us like a brick wall. "No," I said simply. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw it the exact second he realized he had lost. The fight drained out of him all at once, leaving behind something hollow and ugly. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter broke the heavy silence. I picked it up without taking my eyes off him. It was Elena. "Hey," I said, my voice light on purpose. "What's the update?" I listened as she explained everything. The buyer, whoever Evan had tricked into trying to purchase the condo, had immediately pulled out once they received the notice from Elena's office. No sale, no transaction, no messy financial aftermath for me to clean up. She also told me the divorce papers had been filed and that Evan's initial demands were already being shredded by reality. Everything was moving forward exactly as it needed to. I hung up and slipped my phone back into my pocket. "You should start packing," I said, my voice low but firm. "You have 2 weeks to vacate. After that, I'll have the sheriff escort you out." Evan opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but one look at me, and he thought better of it. He grabbed his jacket off the couch and stormed past me without another word, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls rattled. I stood there for a moment longer, breathing deeply, letting the silence settle around me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't broken. I was free. And this was just the beginning. The days that followed were a strange mix of peace and chaos. On one hand, Evan was officially out of my life, his access to the condo legally severed. On the other hand, he refused to accept it. He started calling, at first a few times a day, then nonstop. The voicemails were a twisted roller coaster. One message would be him sobbing, telling me how sorry he was, how he had made a mistake, how he couldn't live without me. The next would be full of venom, threatening to ruin me if I didn't do the right thing, and let him back into the condo. I listened to exactly 2 of them before I blocked his number. I wasn't playing his game. Instead, I threw myself into reclaiming my space. I called Lauren, my best friend since college, and within hours, she showed up at the condo, armed with paint swatches, a Bluetooth speaker, and a case of sparkling water. "We're cleansing this place," she announced, tossing her bag onto the couch. Together, we spent the weekend scrubbing every inch of it clean, not just physically, but emotionally. We repainted the living room a warm, earthy beige, threw out the last few tacky decorations Evan had insisted on keeping, and rearranged the furniture to make the space feel like mine again. We laughed until we cried, danced to terrible pop music, and ordered way too much takeout. It wasn't just about redecorating, it was about reclaiming my life, one small piece at a time. By Sunday evening, the condo didn't just look different. It felt different. It felt like home. I was just starting to believe the worst was behind me when it happened. I had just finished hanging a new mirror in the hallway when I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. My stomach twisted for a split second. He still had a key. I hadn't changed the locks yet because, legally, with the eviction notice pending, there was a process to follow. The door swung open, and in walked Evan, with Nicole clinging to his arm. Nicole. The woman he had left me for. I didn't move. I just stood there, the hammer still in my hand, watching them like they were some bad reality TV show come to life. Evan had the nerve to grin at me. "Brooke," he said, his tone oozing fake charm. "We're just here to grab some of my things. No big deal." Nicole looked around, her nose wrinkling slightly at the new setup, clearly uncomfortable, but trying to play along. I set the hammer down calmly and walked toward them, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "Actually," I said sweetly, "you're trespassing." Evan laughed like I had told a joke. Nicole shifted uncomfortably. "I don't think you understand," I continued, my voice loud enough to carry to the hallway where a few neighbors were poking their heads out. "This is my home. I own it. Evan has no legal right to be here. He attempted to fraudulently sell it without my permission. That's a felony, by the way." Nicole's face turned a fascinating shade of pale. "What is she talking about?" she snapped at Evan, her voice rising. Evan tried to wave it off. "She's lying. She's just bitter." I didn't let him finish. I walked over to the coffee table, picked up the neatly stacked paperwork, the deed, the official letters from Elena's firm, and handed them directly to Nicole. "Maybe you should read this before you start unpacking your things," I said. Nicole flipped through the pages, her eyes growing wider with each line. "You told me you sold it," she hissed at Evan. "You told me it was all set." Evan stammered, reaching for her arm, but she yanked it away like he had burned her. "You're unbelievable," she said, her voice thick with rage and disgust. "You're a liar. You're a scammer. I'm not getting dragged into your mess." Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard behind her that a picture frame on the wall rattled. Evan stood there, looking like he had been physically slapped. For once, he had nothing to say. I crossed my arms and let the silence stretch between us until it became unbearable. Finally, I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up another stack of papers, and dropped them in front of him. "Divorce papers," I said coldly. "Sign them. Today." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but I shut him down with a single look. "You have no cards left to play, Evan. You lost. Accept it." He swallowed hard, his pride visibly crumbling in front of me. Wordlessly, he gathered the papers and left, his footsteps dragging like a man walking toward his execution. When the door clicked shut behind him, I let out a long, slow breath. It was over. Really over this time. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. The divorce papers came back signed 2 days later. No drama, no fight, no last-minute tricks. Just Evan's shaky signature scrawled across the dotted lines. Maybe he realized there was nothing left to salvage. Maybe he finally understood he had lost. Either way, I didn't care. It was done. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the finalized documents, letting the reality of it sink in. It wasn't sadness that washed over me. It wasn't anger either. It was something quieter, something steadier, relief. I thought about the marriage we had built, or at least what I had believed we were building. There were good moments, of course. There always are. Sunday mornings spent tangled up in bed, laughing at stupid TV shows. Dinners with friends where it felt like we were unstoppable, the golden couple everyone admired. But those moments had been just that, moments. Tiny islands of happiness floating in a sea of slow, creeping disappointment. The emotional manipulation, the passive-aggressive jabs, the way Evan made me feel like I was always one mistake away from not being enough, those things had eaten away at the foundation long before I admitted it to myself. And yet, despite it all, I didn't regret it. Because without Evan, without everything we went through, I wouldn't be standing here now, stronger, wiser, finally putting myself first. The next few weeks were a blur of transformation. I hired a locksmith to change the locks. I painted the walls again, this time a soft, buttery white that made the whole condo feel bigger and brighter. I bought a new couch, something ridiculously comfortable and completely impractical, and spent an entire afternoon sinking into it with a book and a cup of tea. The biggest change was in the little things. The photos on the walls were mine now, pictures from my travels, candid shots of friends laughing, sunrises over mountains I had climbed by myself. Every corner of the condo whispered a simple truth: this is your space, your life. Lauren, being the wonderful hurricane that she is, insisted we celebrate properly. Tonight, we toast to your freedom, she said, dragging me to a rooftop bar downtown. The view stretched out for miles, glittering city lights blending into a velvet sky. We clinked glasses, her margarita to my gin and tonic, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. There was a lightness inside me I hadn't felt in years, a giddy sense of possibility humming under my skin. Of course, Evan couldn't resist one last pathetic attempt. Late that night, as I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch, my phone buzzed. A text. Evan, I miss you. We could still fix this if you just stopped being so stubborn. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling nothing but a deep, profound indifference. Then I blocked his number, deleted the message, and tossed the phone onto the other side of the couch without a second thought. He didn't get to rent space in my head anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. I curled up with a blanket, a book forgotten on my lap, and listened to the quiet around me. No tension, no second-guessing, no fear of a door slamming or a cruel word cutting through the peace. Just me. Alive. Whole. Happy. It wasn't just about leaving Evan behind. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had buried to make someone else comfortable. It was about remembering that my dreams, my joy, my voice mattered, and they always had. It was about building a future that didn't revolve around being good enough for someone else. For the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't surviving. I was thriving. And the best part? I was doing it on my terms.